Yeah, so we'll start with a big don't, which is don't generalize. Never mistake language and culture. So we'll use Spanish speakers as an example. I think that's a great kind of case study in that, South Florida Spanish speakers are entirely different than Texas Spanish speakers. So it's really, really dangerous to kind of conflate all those people into one homogenous culture because they all have their own different subsets. They have their own different, idioms and contexts and passions and traditions. So what you never want to do is assume. You don't want to generalize. Because they all have their own value system. So that's where research is really important. So not only doing that boots on the ground research that we talked about a couple minutes ago, but using other tools that I'm sure we'll explore further on down this call, but really researching your market, resisting categorizing into broad groups, and really understanding the driving force behind your individual culture that you're marketing to. So yeah, generalization, we don't want to do that. We certainly want to avoid humor and stereotyping and cultural appropriation. We don't want to do the Cinco de Mayo 3-day only sale and we're wearing sombreros and mustaches. Right? That's something that is, you're gonna have watchdogs at your doorstep. And even if you think you're doing something that is really harmless, chances are it may not translate well. So, multiculturals, they perceive the world through a different lens that's influenced by their own history and it's influenced by their own societal norms. So they do see things differently than we do. And in today's age of social media, funny goes viral. So it's really tempting to kind of do something zany or funny, right, or, something that pushes boundaries, but we really, really want to avoid that. I think we want to be more sincere, at least to start.
Absolutely.
Launching a multicultural campaign.
I want to talk about those 2 points together as a group. I think generalization is a really important point, but I'd love to, Gabe, I think you shared some stories with me too about generalization and want to make sure that we're visualizing or illustrating these points for people so they can understand what that means. Because I think in theory, yes, we're not going to generalize. We know that moving into it. That's great advice, sure. But what are the impacts of that, right? Like
credibility, right? And belief in that and understand the community. I think you want a couple of things that you and I spoke about at length was, just a quick example is, you look at South Florida, or you look at Florida where I'm at, right? And you see so many different, the makeup is so many different countries, but you can kind of put them all in what I would say, yes, you can kind of generalize, but not really. So what I mean by that is really choose your tactics correctly. What I do in South Florida, and the difference between South Florida and New York, for example, is that, right? New York is based a lot on islanders, right? Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, and their interest is completely different than what it is of South Florida. And South Florida is made up mostly of South Americans. Yes, there are Cubans, but now you start looking at tactics in a different way and strategy in a different way, where you don't just want to generalize and say, I'm going to Univision and placing everything on Univision or placing on this or that, right? You want to be super mindful and and hold the tactics and the strategy alike to a high standard, just so you can get really super focused on the backyard. So again, I think you lose a lot of credibility. I think you lose a lot of belief, more than anything, that you understand the community. And again, that once you do that, we could read right through it, right? And you can and we could say, yeah, they just, like you said, they want business. They don't want to help the community. There's a difference between wanting sales and wanting service and wanting all that to up yourself rather than help the community. And I think there is a fine line that cannot be crossed there. It's just, it has to come off genuine.
Absolutely. And you gave me an example of, even within the Hispanic community, how sports can be very different. And so understanding that is not just about, understanding that specific community, but it's also on how to deploy advertising to better influence that community, to let them know that you are an option for them. You had a good example. Can you share that one about sports?
Yeah. Again, going back, and so if I'm advertising in New York, and in Florida. There's two different ways that I look at it, right? The South Florida community is huge on soccer, right? Being South American, being that the population is made mostly of that. Now, I'm not saying that New York doesn't love soccer, don't get me wrong, right? But what I'm saying is that when you look at the bulk of the community and what they're made up of and their interests, and the community like we do know it, then you start to tend and put certain tactics together. For example, like as I said, in New York, if mostly Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, I'm definitely tapping into the baseball market, right? I'm definitely putting my eyeballs there and putting my advertising there in order to get that community. Now, if I'm in South Florida and the Messi mania is going on right now, which is happening right in South Florida, there's a lot of eyeballs there, right? And just tailoring that message towards those individuals where they're going to be watching. So again, each market is very, very different. And as I said to you, if you look at just I would call it the regular market, right? The non-multicultural market. What's interesting in Georgia is maybe not interesting in California or in Texas or in the Midwest, right? So we got to think about it that way as well in order to really hone into the community.